All right, so our first question here to think about tonight was there ever a time in your life when you were shown unconditional love, even though you weren't acting in a lovable manner? You weren't acting in a manner that maybe others would say is deserving of someone showing you love. Is there ever a time in your life? I heard one, sure. Anybody else?
Well, mine was whenever I was a kid. I was a terrible kid.
Okay. I don't believe that, but okay.
You didn't know me.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So who did you get the unconditional love from?
My mother.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I was thinking about this, and I'm sure there were times with my parents as well, but you know, I can't think of a specific time, but I know that my wife has been gracious and loving to me when I have not been lovable in all the years we've been together. Hopefully, it hasn't been recently, but I can think definitely early on, there were a number of times. Again, specifics, I can't really think of the exact specifics, but I know for a fact that I acted poorly, did not act as deserving love, and yet she was lovable to me. Anybody else want to share a thought or a story or something on that before we move on? All right. What is so unique about the kind of love that God has demonstrated for mankind? What is John 3:16? Somebody quote it for us.
For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life.
Absolutely. And in Romans 5:6-8, which is on the screen here, says, for while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the righteous, the holy, the lovable,
ungodly.
Ooh, the ungodly. Christ died for the ungodly, for one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one might dare even to die. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So what is unique about the kind of love that God has demonstrated for mankind? According to those two verses.
I would say it's undeserved.
Okay, it's undeserved. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you kind of picked that up from where it said ungodly, right? Right. Go ahead, Tim. Did you say something?
Well, so that even though we're a people that you could say are against him, that are not serving him, that have done things he doesn't want us to do, that we do things he despises, and in spite of all of that, he still loved us enough to send his son to die for us, so that
Right.
you know we have a chance.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's undeserved. Undeserved. I like that. And that there's a chance. While we were his enemies, right? While we were the ungodly, while we were his enemies, still sinners, all of those kinds of things. It wasn't when we became lovable. It wasn't when humanity turned around and became holy and righteous and all of that. No, it was while we were still enemies. It was while we were ungodly. What is different between God's unique kind of love that he demonstrates and what a lot of people think of in the world as love? What is the contrast there? In light of what we said in the scriptures that we're looking at here, what's the difference between what the world would see as love?
Well, I think the world looks at reciprocal relationships and almost scorekeeping in a sense of,
That's a good way to put it.
I love you because you love me, or when I fall in love with you, I expect you to fall in love with me, and it's sometimes based on physical or romantic situation. If we're talking about that kind of love, which I know is a different, but then if we're talking about love in this sense, it is, scorekeeping of.
Yeah, I like that reciprocal.
Are you worthy? Are you worthy of my love?
Right. Have you ever heard somebody say something along the lines of, I'll show them respect when they show me respect, something like that? You ever heard something along those lines? I want respect, and I'll give it as soon as I get it. And very similar, right? It's the same kind of concept. So within the realm of what we're just talking about, everyday life, the world, that kind of thing, there's always this concept of reciprocal. You've got to earn it. It's almost like earned, isn't it? It's like an earned kind of love. Yeah. It's an earned respect.
But when you say that out loud like that, you kind of think about it. It's never going to happen if both sides think that way. If we're both of that opinion, we're going to butt heads and never get anywhere.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'll love you when you show me some love, and you're going to say the same thing, and we're going nowhere. That's not love.
Do we see that in the world?
Yes.
All over the place.
Yeah. Flip on Facebook. I mean, just, we see this all over the place, don't we? I will respect, I use the word respect, but again, it could be this concept of lovableness or deserving. But yeah, you're right, Tim, that there's never going to be, if we have this mindset, and some people are not of this mindset, but the majority of people within the world, and we could fall victim to this too. We could fall victim to, I'll love you, I'll respect you, I'll treat you well when you treat me well. It's just a very common, in some ways it seems normative. Maybe even some people might think practical. It's just kind of the way the world works. I will give you love as soon as you've earned it. Something like that. So yeah, it's definitely different. This concept that we find here in the scriptures is different. And in fact, radically different, isn't it? Because you don't typically love your enemies, do you? I was just thinking worldly, right? You don't love your enemies.
As you say this, I think this is a foundation and a huge point that is lost on us of this is really how we can share the gospel, because that which should be unique in us, to be peculiar, to be the ones that love those who don't love us, that show kindness to those who don't show kindness to us, who cause people to pause and say, wow, I didn't expect that. And, showing love is that very foundation. And it was shown to us as an example. And I would say that I think we would bring more people to Christ if we would stay true to this.
Yeah, no, I can't agree with you more. Absolutely. I think what we wrestle with is this concept of how radical it really is, and how different it really is, and how, if I can put it this way, how stupid it is, right? From a very worldly perspective, this kind of concept, love your enemies, is stupid, in the world's eyes. It's just, hopefully that shocks us, because that's really what it is. it's just opposite, right? It's upside down. It's backwards. It's not the way it's really meant to work in the world. But I think you're absolutely right in your observation there that this kind of stuff is foundational. Absolutely. All right. I would encourage you to have your scriptures ready. I should have mentioned this a little earlier. I apologize. We're going to be reading Luke chapter 15, 11 through 32. Now I'll read the text because it's quite a lengthy portion of text. But if you want to be able to read it, because you probably can't read it from my screen, but if you want to read it, it's Luke chapter 15, and we're going to be looking at verses 11 through 32. So Luke chapter 15, 11 through 32. Follow along and think about this story here as we get ready to maybe talk about some of the things we find here. It says this, Luke 15, 11. And he said, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And his son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer to be worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robes and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. And as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. He said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad. For this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. All right, so based on the 2 sons' actions, think about the actions. Which son might you expect the father to love, and which might you expect him to resent? If he were to resent, which one would you expect to be loved? Which one would you expect to be resented?
You'd resent prodigal.
Yeah, right? I mean, isn't that right? I mean, you would expect, right? If you just read this story, now we all know the story, so we're at an advantage in some ways. at a disadvantage in other ways because we know the story. But if you just stopped kind of before the son got home to talk to his father, and you said, what is the next, what's the results? What's going to happen? You would probably expect that the father would be angry, that the father might be looking to punish, something along those lines. That's what we would expect to happen. In fact, who would we expect the father to show his love towards? Which of the sons?
The one that was always with him.
Yeah, the one that's hard working in the fields, hasn't wished that his father was dead, right? I mean, he's asking for his inheritance is really what's going on there. And you only get the inheritance when your parents are dead. And so really in a kind of a roundabout way, it's almost as if he's saying, I wish you were dead. Give me my money. So you would expect the father to love the son who stayed with him and to resent or chastise or discipline the son that went off. But how did the father respond to the return of the younger son?
He saw him a long ways off and ran to him.
What does that tell us about the father for a moment? Just in what you said, Paul?
A father has a love for his children.
Absolutely. So this father had a love for his prodigal son, the son who had abandoned him. What else do we know that he saw him far off?
Because he watched every day.
He was looking, right? Right, he was looking. Watchful. Yeah, watchful. He was looking. He was watchful. We could even use the word desire, right? He was desiring, maybe hoping, wishing, wanting, waiting for his son to come home. What else do we know that he ran to him? Just thinking about the father in the story. Was it dignifying for a businessman, a well-respected man of the community, to run anywhere?
No.
It was not. That's correct. It was not dignified. A wealthy, well-respected nobleman in the community would not run anywhere. So what does this tell us about the way the father feels about the son versus the way the father feels about his own dignity?
I don't think that he was really thinking about his dignity. He was thinking about his child.
Absolutely. So he wasn't thinking about it at all. Could care less. In that moment, could care less, right? That wasn't the big deal. It was something far more. So what else? How did the father respond? What are some of the other things that we see in the text about the father when he reaches out, when he meets the son? There's a few other things there.
He embraced him and kissed him.
Absolutely. He embraces him, kisses him. Does he let him explain and do his whole speech? Yeah.
No, he tries to. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. He keeps him. He won't even let him speak, right? He tries to get this whole speech out, this whole confession. The father won't even let him speak. What's he do?
Well, he wanted to get something to put on him because of he looked bad.
Uh-huh.
And
yeah, where had he been?
Well, in the pig pen.
Right. So you're right. He looked bad.
I think the father didn't want the people to see him like that. He loved his son, and he wanted him to be presentable.
Yeah, he wanted to cover him, huh?
Yeah.
I wanted to cover up.
Get some clothes, get some shoes, and
and a ring, right? Even a ring, right?
A ring.
Put a ring on there. Ring talks about being part of the family, maybe even some royal aspects, things of that nature. Absolutely,
I
covering
was
it up.
just, I was just thinking, to the Jewish people, him taking care of pigs
Mm,
would be even more, to them, it would be contaminating. Um, this father, is obviously crossing the line with a guy that's lived with the pigs, pork,
oh,
all of,
yes.
that me would, I mean, it doesn't affect me, but I was thinking the audience it would have affected maybe.
Oh, this would be shocking. This would be shocking. Keeping of pigs it was unclean. It was an unclean animal. They couldn't eat it. They weren't allowed to keep it. Pigs were equated with the Gentiles, very unclean, really opposed to God. All of that. Absolutely. That would be when it says he was feeding the pigs and wanted to eat what the pigs were eating. You're right, Mike. We don't fully grasp what's going on there, but this would have been the lowest of the low. This would have been the depths of depravity and wickedness and uncleanness. This would be as far down as you could kind of go, at least symbolically, right? Picture this would have
Well,
been really, really,
he's
really bad.
disobeying the law.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
That's
definitely
right.
going, yeah.
Yeah,
And
disobeying the law. Yeah.
I think in a sense, as we read through that, everything he's doing, it's the father is really restoring him to where he once was. I
That's
think he
right.
wants him to be seen as this is my son, and this is how you knew him before, and I'm going to get him back there again.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a rejoicing that happens too, right?
Yeah,
He doesn't just do all these, these physical things. He does. I mean, he's demonstrating his love for him by what he does. But there's a rejoicing that happens. And basically we could say he's taking care of him, right? If we wanted to kind of sum it up, I like what you had to say, Tim, about he's kind of restoring him to the place that he was once at. He had lost a certain position. He had sunk so low, so depraved, so wicked, so unclean, and yet the Father is wanting to restore him, wanting to clothe him, wanting to wrap him up, wanting to cover, we could say, the maybe the stench, cover the grime, and again bring him to that position that he once had. Absolutely, absolutely. So how did the older brother act when the younger son returned?
Get mad.
He got mad. He got mad.
Yeah.
Why'd he get mad?
I've been taking care of you all this time, and he's been out running around, and now you're doing this.
That's right. I've been here this whole time. I've behaved, and you haven't done all these things that you're doing for him. Do you think there might be some jealousy?
yes.
I think.
Sounds like there's a little jealousy in there. There's definitely resentment, right? I mean, think we can see that in there. There's anger. Would you say do you think maybe there's even some hate? Like he is filled with some hate?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so
It
too.
may be hurt.
Could be hurt. There could be some hurt there as well. What happens a lot of times when somebody is hurt? What might someone do if they feel hurt?
They look for somebody to lash out at.
Yeah, they can lash out, right? So there might be some hurt there. There's definitely some jealousy. There could be a lot of mixed emotions going on here as well. All of these things. It's clear. I think there's a lot going on with the older brother. How does he refer to his brother in the text?
Your son.
Your son. It almost seems to
He didn't
be,
call him brother. He called him your
yeah,
son.
almost seems to be he's not even wanting to acknowledge maybe their relationship. I might be reading a little too much into the text, but very interesting that he says your son and he doesn't say my
It,
brother, right?
it reminds me of Adam saying, the woman that you gave me.
Yeah, right, right.
They
Yeah.
don't want to really own up to our relationship sometimes when they aren't
Right.
going so well.
You know, and I bring that up because Shannon and I joke sometimes. And when our kids are misbehaving, I'll say, your kids, your kids are acting up, right?
Yeah.
Listen,
Yeah.
when they come home with A's and B's from school, it's like my kids have gotten A's and B's. Your
We
kids are
do that to each
misbehaving.
other.
Yeah, yeah, probably most parents, right? Right.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully, we do it jokingly, and Shannon and I do it jokingly, but there's something there. We do it jokingly because there is something, maybe not in our family, but that's only a joke because it's a reality in some realms, isn't it? It wouldn't be a joke if it was not something that was that had some truth to it, at least in some realms. So this disassociation, these aren't my kids, they're your kids. This is not my brother, this is your son. And I like what you did with the Genesis as well. I think we see a lot of parallels there as well. So yeah, really good on those parallels. So based on his response, right, the older brother, based on his response, how would you describe his love for his younger brother?
I don't think there was any.
Okay,
trick
question, right? There wasn't any. There was no. Was there any concern whatsoever?
Doesn't seem to be.
Yeah. Who was he concerned? Go ahead.
I think the older brother's biggest concern was, this boy has come back. Is my dad going to divide his inheritance again?
Right. Could he be right? Some more jealousy, some more concern about maybe, is he going to gobble up some more? Worried about. So ultimately, the brother is worried about himself, isn't he? He's not worried about his father. He's not worried about his brother. He's really worried about himself because he keeps pointing it back to himself, doesn't he? Even when he talks to his father, he says, you never did this for me. You never did that for me. Right. He's all wrapped up in himself. At least that's what it seems. So I would suggest that this is kind of, I don't see any love. I don't see any action of love on the brother's part. And that was mentioned. So he's certainly not showing any. So here's the homework, right? How can you demonstrate God's unconditional love this week? What quote unquote undeserving person can you extend love and forgiveness to this week? This is, I think these are important. Not every Bible study do we have these kind of, take away and try to go and put into practice some things. But I think it's important on occasion for us to do these kind of things and to think about this. I believe it was you, Tim, who said early on that this is a foundational issue, this issue of a God's kind of love. And if we were more loving to people who were quote unquote undeserving, quote unquote unlovable, people who might be considered our enemies, and we showed them this kind of love, how many more people would be drawn to Christ if we did that? So I really hope that you think about these things this week and contemplate. There may be when we examine ourselves, sometimes we find we might not we might not recognize it, but sometimes we might view people as our enemies. You know, I'm thinking about on Facebook, right? I mean, how many Christians are posting all kinds of hateful things about whatever the opposition is to their view, whatever the other side is, you know, or just throwing out digs, right? Maybe not even being blatant, but you can kind of tell when somebody's digging, right? When somebody's throwing a little dig in there and wants to grind it in, or you know, if we would consider these people, even if we consider them our enemies, you know, Christ says, love your enemies, do good to those who persecute you, love the undeserving, because we are recipients of God's undeserving kindness, his undeserving love, aren't we? I mean, I think that's what Romans said, didn't it? I mean, I think that said the ungodly. You know, he came to rescue the ungodly while we were still his enemies, while we were weak. At the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. So, you know, I think this is important. If we always put Christ first, then I think it's easier. I'm not saying it's easy, but I think it's easier for us to get into the right mindset, because we look to him and we say, listen, he loved me when I was unlovable. He changed me. He did what I did not deserve. He paid a debt he did not owe. I owed a debt I could not pay, right? And so when we look at it that way, we can say, you know what? We have done far worse to God, and yet he's forgiven us in Jesus. I think we can forgive, right? This goes back to that parable of the servant, right? The servant who owed, you know, a lot of money, millions of dollars. His master forgives him. He sends him out, and that servant goes to a fellow servant, says, pay me what you owe me, which was far less. And he wouldn't forgive him. He wanted to have him beaten and thrown in prison and all that. You know, we've been forgiven so much. We have been loved so much that we need to remember that. And regardless of what other people have done to us or whatever we think, we should be demonstrating God's unconditional love. So think about that this week, and try to act on that at least once this week. You know, what undeserving person can you extend love and forgiveness to this week? Anybody got any last thoughts, questions, comments, concerns?